What do you know about Malcolm X? What have you heard? What do you think about him? Malcolm X, without question, is one of the most misunderstood personalities in American history, in Black history. But he was an interesting person. I've read many different articles about him. I've researched writings that people who were fans of or friends of, as well as people who were opponents of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a complex man, to be sure. Malcolm X was a man who had passion about the issue of race, particularly as it relates to how Black people were being treated, first in the United States and then globally. Malcolm X was a Black nationalist, but let me define that term as I understand it as it applies to Malcolm X. He believed that Black people should love themselves. He believed that Black people ultimately should have the final say in who governs them, that they should have a fair chance at electing people who represent them in various levels of government. He believed that Black people should know their history, all of their history, not just the most recent 400 years when we were in this compromised condition of slaves and the descendants of former slaves. Malcolm was an enlightened man, but he didn't start out his life on a bed of roses. In fact, a common criticism, as it were, or observation that is made about Malcolm was that he hated white people. Well, I can see how if you're skimming the surface and you've not read his literature and you've not actually read his biography and you've not actually read or observed some of the conversations that he's had with media people, where he gave many interviews, I can understand if you haven't looked at all of this material, you might come to that conclusion because you're getting sound bites. I know when I was growing up, all I had about Malcolm X, all I knew about him was sound bites. By any means necessary. That's a famous quote. Another famous quote is, "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock, Plymouth Rock landed on us." So those quotes and those sound bites make him seem like he's a very angry man. Well, did he have a reason to be angry? I say yes. Well, and let me tell you about him. I think if I can take a moment to introduce Malcolm to you a little bit more. His grandmother was born in the Caribbean nation of Grenada. His grandmother was assaulted by a white man, and from that assault, his mother was born. So his mother was biracial. His father, who was from Georgia, had at least 4 brothers who were killed by the Ku Klux Klan. His father was also somehow affiliated with, if you know anything about Marcus Garvey and the United Negro Improvement Association, his father was one of those early proponents of this movement. His father was menaced by this Klan-like group. I believe the name of the group was the Black Knights. They told him to stop talking about racial equality. Malcolm X was born in Omaha, Nebraska. You thought it was Alabama, or maybe you thought it was Harlem. No, he was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1925. And one of the reasons why we're having this conversation today is because throughout the month of February and all the way to May 19th, we will be looking at Malcolm's quotes, because this year, if he was living, would be his 100th birthday. But he was born in Omaha, Nebraska. When the Klan started kicking up, his family moved to Michigan on a small farm. They continued to menace his father and threaten him. His father died in a mysterious streetcar accident. Some close to the facts, who knew the facts, said that the Klan, or the Black Knight, beat him up, laid him on the tracks, and he got ran over by a train. So here we go. Malcolm X, what does he know about white people? A white man assaults his grandmother, and his mother's biracial as a result of that. 4 of his uncles, of his paternal uncles, were killed by the Klan. And then, lo, his father is killed by a Klan-like organization. If Malcolm was angry, he might have had a reason to be angry with white people. But the story doesn't end there for Malcolm. Malcolm was one of 7 or 8 children. I believe it's 7. So when his father was killed, his mother was left to do whatever she could to support the family. But the weight of losing her husband and trying to raise 7 children was too much. His mother had a nervous breakdown and she was institutionalized. Once she was institutionalized, all of their siblings were scattered to different foster homes around Michigan. His mother never came back from the mental institution. The last time he saw her, when he was, I guess, 27 years old, she didn't even recognize who he was. But when Malcolm was in middle school or junior high, he was a bright, inquisitive student. He was popular. He attended a majority white school in the foster care home that he lived in. He was so excited and so enthusiastic about learning, he told his English teacher that when he grows up, he wants to be a lawyer. And his white English teacher told him that he needs to set realistic goals because the N-word people are not capable of being lawyers. And that last little knife seemingly crushed his spirit and turned him in a direction where he began to act out and to commit petty crimes, and he found himself in and out of juvenile detention. And that went on for quite some time until he was sent to live with his sister in Boston, in the black part of Boston, in the Roxbury part of Boston. When he got over there, he hooked up with some roughnecks and he started committing burglaries. He was part of a burglary ring and he got caught. And guess what? He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And while he was in prison, he was introduced to the Nation of Islam, the teachings of the Nation of Islam, which emphasize self-respect, pride, independence, self-determination, moral and spiritual purity. And he was hungry for something. It reached him at the right time in his life in terms of him being open to this. So he committed himself to being a devout Muslim as he understood it, as it was presented to him. Now, if you know about the Nation of Islam and you know about Orthodox Muslim teachings, it's not exactly the same, I'll just say that. Because the Nation of Islam's teachings is a reaction, this is just Jerry Gurley's opinion, can be construed and has to be interpreted in the context of what was happening to black people and the reaction that black people were having to their white Christian brothers who said on Sundays that they loved the Lord, but on Sunday night they came and burnt crosses in their front yard, came and snatched Uncle Joe and Uncle Bob out of the house and lynched them while all claiming to have the love of God in their heart. There came a point where black people, more in the North than in the South, but black people in general said, you know, whatever your religion is, we don't want any of it. And even if we have to come up with something that we call the nation, it's better than what y'all are peddling because clearly y'all don't believe in what you're teaching and clearly you're not living it. So Malcolm was open to the nation because of that. I think many people were anything other than. That was really the thought, anything other than. And so because the Nation of Islam taught that black people should respect themselves, that black people should love themselves, that black people should work with each other and not fight each other, that black people should become self-sufficient, that black people should find ways to govern themselves in every sense of the term, hence the nation, the terminology, the Nation of Islam. That too was threatening to the white establishment. If you've listened to some of my lectures, you know I talked about a person by the name of Marcus Garvey who got on the radar screen of the FBI. Well, Malcolm got on that radar screen as well. They were spying on him. They were looking at ways to undermine him, to delegitimize him in the eyes of black people because they didn't want black people taking the attitude that Malcolm was taking, which was, we don't need white people. We need ourselves. We need God and we need ourselves. That was threatening to white people, to the white establishment then, and guess what? it's still threatening.